You go into the sort of depression and the hopelessness and the rage and the anger. It was obviously affecting my relationship with my partner because he just didn't know which version of me he was going to get. Do you want to go on the pill?
More hormones.
More hormones. Yeah. Like I would be sat watching my family and my husband and my 2 young kids like playing, and I just had no connection to that. Like I didn't feel the joy that I knew I should be feeling. People with PMDD, basically their body has a different reaction to it. There's something that changes in the brain chemistry of the population.
Yeah.
Are impacted by their menstrual cycle.
So now if I got PMDD, because I assume it can happen at any time like it did with you, Jenny.
So technically, could I have kind of PMDD and not even know about it until I get a cycle? Or because these are stopping my hormones working?
And the only way to stop the symptoms is to stop the cycle, but then you want to have a child, you have to remove yourself off that treatment.
Suicidal thoughts are one strong thing about that, and I can imagine if you're trying to bring a child in, how you're going to react to if you're thinking like that.
I'm now becoming somebody who's like wanting to create more space for that, who's wanting to sort of use my experience.
Hello and welcome to Becoming Lucy with me, Hannah.
And me, Lucy. So before we begin this episode, this is a gentle heads up for our listeners. Today's episode includes a discussion of premenstrual dystrophic, is that how I say it? Dysphoric. There we go. Disorder, including themes of depression, emotional distress, and suicidal times and suicidal thoughts. It's not the core of the episode, but it's the reality for many people living with PMDD.
Yes, so if at any point this conversation feels heavy for you, it's okay. Pause, take a breath, step away, or of course seek support. Our aim is to try and educate using Jenny, our guest, who is a subject matter expert on this topic. We also want you to understand and also to bring hope. We never aim to overwhelm.
So today's episode is an important one. It's honest, it's raw, and it needs to be talked about. We're opening up a conversation around a condition that affects so many, but is so deeply misunderstood.
Yes, and as we've referenced already, we are talking about PMDD, and this is far beyond a bit of PMS. Some studies suggest that actually 1 in 20 women in the UK experience it, but very few actually get it diagnosed.
For some, PMDD brings exhaustion. For others, rage, and for many, the feeling of becoming a stranger to yourself during the most intense week of your cycle.
And today we want to show the reality, but also the hope, how self-advocacy, understanding and community can transform what often feels unmanageable.
And today, we're joined by someone remarkable. It's Jenny. She's a daughter, a mother, and an advocate, and the founder of a women's health community. And Jenny, thank you for being here.
It's so good to have you. But before we actually dig a little bit deeper, this is the part of our episodes where we normally say to the guest, so how do you know Lucy? How do you know Hannah? But actually it's a little bit different today, Jenny. So Jenny became aware of the Becoming Lucy podcast at a Wild and Wild networking event. And after, she actually found the courage and the confidence to message our Becoming Lucy Instagram page and offer to be a guest, which is just fantastic. And we're so happy to have you here so we can talk about this discussion that definitely Lucy and I have no prior knowledge about. We are ready to get educated and we are ready to hear all about your story. So thank you again and thank you for reaching out. We're really super grateful.
I'm so pleased for the opportunity. So thank you for having me.
No, absolute pleasure. And with that, we'll start with you. So Jenny, to go right to the beginning, who were you before PMDD entered your life? Tell us more about the woman behind the story.
So before PMDD, it feels like a lifetime ago, I was just a very average, normal, extroverted, career-driven, friendly, outgoing, energetic person who had a very average and normal experience with my hormones. I would say that I had never struggled in any way with my hormonal experience. I didn't have like super heavy periods. I didn't have particularly bad PMS that I kind of can remember. You know, as everybody that has a menstrual cycle, you know, you have your ups and downs and it affects you in different ways, and you know, you don't look forward to that week. But I was just living my life. I was really proud of my career. I was really ambitious. I had a great social life, a great group of friends, and was always the kind of first one to sort of make social plans and, you know, not bow out of things. So yeah, I was just Jenny. I was just kind of, that was the me that I knew then, and that everybody knew.
And when did things start to change then, and what did that look like?
So for me, my second pregnancy with my daughter, I had her in 2018. So my second pregnancy, and it felt quite different to my first pregnancy with my son. So I had a very easy pregnancy with my son, really enjoyed being pregnant. I really enjoyed being pregnant with my daughter, but I suffered a lot more with like morning sickness, not just in the morning, just kind of nausea, really throughout the whole of the pregnancy. And it would come in kind of waves and peaks and troughs. And it felt that it was almost tied to what I put down to. This is all just my assessment of it, because, you know, it wasn't like tested or anything. But it felt like maybe when there was a surge of like a big growth spurt for her going on, or there was something like really significant happening with my hormones at the certain kind of crucial stages of the pregnancy, even past that sort of first trimester point when normally the sort of nausea sort of settles down. But I'd find that I'd have a peak of nausea, I'd have like outbreaks of spots, I'd have like headaches, I'd just have this kind of couple of days or a week or so where all of these intense, what felt like hormonally driven things were happening in my body. So I had my daughter, and then when I went onto a progesterone only contraceptive pill, one that I'd been on prior to my pregnancy, and I'd tolerated it fine. I'd been on it for a number of years, and it did something really weird to me. It made me a little bit crazy. It made me very volatile. I sort of lost any sort of sense of myself. I was incredibly emotional and irrational and up and down. And I just put it down to the fact that, or maybe I've gone back onto this too soon after my pregnancy, and I stopped taking it and I just let my natural cycle come back. And I would say within a couple of months of my natural cycle returning, I started to notice something wasn't quite right with me, and I would have a feeling sometimes of just being really low, really, really down. And along with that came the irritability and sort of rage and volatility that I'd seen when I'd been taking the progesterone only pill. It took a while to notice that this came in a pattern, and that I would have a couple of days where I would just be this rage monster, this sort of version of myself that was really snappy, that was really reactive, really emotional, and just not rational at all. And I'm generally a pretty rational, pretty sensible person. And that was really difficult for my husband, because he didn't know what to expect one day to the next. I found myself getting incredibly reactive to the kids and having really short patience. And when you've got two young children, like, it's hard and it tests your patience at the best of times. So to find that all of a sudden you have like zero patience, and actually what I found was that I just became so reactive in a number of different emotions. It would either be, I would be so reactive in terms of I would burst into tears for no reason, or I would lose my temper, or I would just lose my rag. And it was unsettling, both for me and for my husband. And the weirdest part of it was that I'd have this kind of window of time where I felt this way, and then I'd feel hugely guilty about reacting in this way, because it was clearly irrational, and kind of on reflection, I could see that in myself. But then maybe, a week later, I'd feel completely like myself again. And I'd look back on how I'd behaved or how I'd felt or the way that my brain had sort of interpreted situations or the kind of stories that it had told me about what was happening in my life and how I was thinking and feeling. And I was like, what was I thinking? Like, what was happening? And it was really unsettling, because I'd look back and I'd be like, who was that person? Like, that's not me. And then I'd kind of gaslight myself and be like, oh, well, maybe it was just a one-off, or maybe I didn't really kind of feel that bad, or, maybe that didn't really happen. And so I was on this roller coaster, and it literally felt like I was Jekyll and Hyde. Like I was two different people at different points in the cycle. And it was obviously affecting my relationship with my partner, because he just didn't know which version of me he was going to get from, one week to the next. I had periods of just feeling so paranoid and became kind of like I was overthinking everything in these PMDD windows. I'd get so easily overwhelmed. I'd think everybody hated me. I would feel like I was completely failing at life, at work, at everything. And I just remember feeling so incredibly overwhelmed about everything. Getting out of bed in the morning was really difficult. And just, navigating the days was a real challenge.
Yeah. And through obviously these ups and downs, you're second guessing yourself. Like any woman, we always look back like, was that because of this? Was that because of like period? When was it then you sought out to reach help? Was that with a GP? Was that with friends? Tell us more about that.
So first and foremost, like I realized, and I knew something wasn't right. So I went to speak to a GP at my local surgery. I'd asked for a female doctor because I was sure that it was something that was happening with my hormones. And essentially they told me it just sounds like the normal woman's experience of fluctuating hormones. Do you want to go on the pill?
More hormones.
More hormones. Yeah. So I can't have the combined contraceptive pill because I have a history of migraines. So if you've got a history of migraines, you that's not an option for you. So the progesterone only one was the only option to me. And after my more recent experience of it after my daughter, I was like, well, I'm not going to touch that with a barge pole. So I left feeling, first and foremost, completely disheartened and completely unheard, and like I was losing my mind, quite frankly. Like, we go to doctors for the validation and for the support and for the recognition, and also for them to hear us when we're saying, my quality of life is really bad right now and I want you to help me improve it. So to hear that there's nothing wrong with you, you just basically have to accept that this is your lot in life, was really, really hard. And ultimately I wasn't willing to accept that. Because I just knew deep down that something wasn't right, and I couldn't keep going like this. So this is when I started kind of researching, and this is not an uncommon experience for a lot of people in the PMDD boat and in the boat of many other reproductive health conditions. They have to kind of find the answers themselves. For me, my light bulb moment where I kind of realized what was happening, I was reading a book by someone called Maisie Hill, her book Period Power. First and foremost, I would recommend it to anybody, particularly people who have a menstrual cycle, but I think it's also really happy for anybody who knows somebody with a menstrual cycle, because it's
so that's everyone then.
Exactly. And it just I was reading this section, and I remember it so vividly. I was laying in bed next to my husband, and I was reading this section, and it was explaining about PMDD and about how PMDD is an adverse reaction to the natural fluctuating hormones that are in the body throughout the menstrual cycle, specifically the progesterone that's in the second half of the cycle. So the progesterone is supposed to be the hormone that like keeps you safe and calms you down and keeps you chilled and keeps you at home and wants you to hunker down under a blanket because you might be pregnant, you might have conceived and your body doesn't know it just yet. So it's wanting to protect you in the run up to potentially, you having a baby. people with PMDD, basically, their body has a different reaction to it. There's something that changes in the brain chemistry, that the presence of that hormone just does something completely different. And the way I've described it to people in the past is it's basically like your body is allergic to that hormone. So it does something it's not supposed to. And I just remember reading this explanation about how it can, like, you know, make you feel like you're two different people. And it can send you off the deep end, and, you know, the depression and the anxiety and the sort of losing all joy for life. And that's how I'd felt. And I remember articulating this feeling of, like, I would be sat watching my family, like my husband and my two young kids, like playing or being silly or doing something. And I just had no connection to that. Like, I didn't feel the joy that I knew I should be feeling. And that's what really made me realize that, like, I felt broken because, like, this isn't the way it's supposed to be.
No, it was funny when you said about watching your husband and kids, because in my head it's the kids that I want to just circle back to, when you were saying, obviously, it was after your daughter and then you went to the GP. And do you think, had you not had your son, do you think they might have gone down the route of postnatal depression? You know, like, because you already had a child and this was your second child and you were able to notice the difference. Do you think they would have sat and said, it's not mood swings, you've got postnatal depression? And how wrong they would have been if they had diagnosed you with that. So I think what I'm trying to get at is, you were lucky enough to have already experienced having those crazy hormones that happen after you give birth, and you were able to distinguish between the two, and you were able to sort of know that it was something completely different. And time frame wise, how long was it that you suffered and you struggled and you were battling with kind of knowing that this wasn't anything to do with giving birth, this was something more serious? What was that time frame before you went to seek help from the doctor?
So it was actually quite a long time frame. I would say it was about 12 months. So my cycle, so I breastfed my daughter, and so I would say it was probably about 7-8 months after I had her that my cycle returned. So until that kicked in, and then I would say it was probably another 6 months of things not being quite right before I started to recognise. And by this point, we were then starting to get into COVID times, which was stressful and, you know, a little bit insane, which was like another layer of just insanity, basically,
And
for
were you
all of
working
us.
as well, or you're on maternity?
So
at
I
the
was
same
back to
time?
work by this
Right,
point. I'd gone
So
back to
again, more
work. I was
stress,
working. And in reality, that probably made me wait for longer than I would have done to kind of go to the doctor and have conversations, because I kept telling myself that we're living in, I hate to say the word, unprecedented times. Everybody is stressed. Like there's you know, I've just got anxiety and fear because the world is a really scary place right now.
But it's that gaslighting to yourself that you said. You're not being kind to yourself, which is not your fault. We're all guilty of it, where you were just trying to make justifications for something that you were just trying to understand. And what's so sad is that when you finally plucked the courage up to go to the GP, they basically validated your justifications against yourself, which is just awful, because like you said, you wanted them just to say, yeah, this is not right, let's talk about it, let's, you know, dig deeper. And you then sort of said you went off and did lots of research and things like that. So when was the point that you were able to find someone or something that, you know, you could resonate with?
So I think, so I would say it was probably around autumn time 2020 that actually I kind of discovered PMDD. I made the connections myself. I found the PMDD community that exists online. So there are a lot of really vocal advocates on Instagram talking about PMDD, sharing their experiences. And once I sort of tapped into that, I had the kind of collateral to go back and have a conversation with the doctor and say, I need you to pay attention and listen to me because this is what's happening to me and I need some help.
Yeah, with the doctor thing, because I've obviously watched This Morning quite a lot now, not being at work. There's quite a lot of doctors that are not even trained on this. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So what was
absolutely.
your experience then? Like, I mean, I don't know if you know the stat, like, 'cause I have heard it, but I can't recite it because I don't want to say it wrong. But like,
12
was it?
years to diagnosis.
Yeah, exactly.
12
Like,
years.
12 years.
That's the
And
average, yeah. So the kind of well-known stats around PMDD is that the average duration for diagnosis is 12 years because women get gaslit so much and are expected to tolerate awful norm experience of life. Our quality of life just isn't really prioritized. And then what a lot of people actually find is that PMDD often will get misdiagnosed as fast cycling bipolar. So because of duality of PMDD in terms of how you kind of go from being one version of yourself to then kind of moving into this, this feeling of this sort of dark cloud descending, and you go into the sort of depression and the hopelessness and the rage and the anger, that pattern gets confused with bipolar because that's the only thing that doctors very often know of. So yeah, those are the kind of most common sort of quotes and stats that get spouted about PMDD.
So what happened then when you went back to the doctors? You were armed with your research, you found your community, and you were about to say a big fuck you, right?
I went back. I asked for a different doctor. I remember I'd asked because I'd done some research and I'd read all of the how to have the conversations with your doctor, your GP about PMDD. And I'd asked for a doctor that specialised in kind of women's hormonal health. The reception were just really confused and were like, "Oh, well, we've got women doctors," as if like just being a woman made you a expert or a specialist or gave you the kind of qualification. So I didn't push it, and I went and I had this appointment with the doctor, and it was over the phone because it was at the time where we weren't kind of going in and seeing doctors face to face. And I was so nervous having the conversation, and I'd really kind of prepared myself to have to sort of go into battle and fight. And I explained what was happening. I explained my symptoms and my pattern, and I was quite emotional. And she'd heard of PMDD. She knew about PMDD and had treated women with PMDD before. And I just felt so validated when she said, absolutely, this sounds exactly like you have PMDD. And I just remember crying down the phone to her, just like saying, thank you so much. So she was brilliant, and she has continued to be brilliant over the last 5 years, basically, as a point of contact for me to help me sort of navigate and manage my PMDD. She referred me to the local hospital gynae department to have a kind of more in-depth conversation. She ran some blood tests for me, and she's continued to run blood tests for me just to monitor my hormone levels. The important thing to note though with PMDD is you can't get a blood test to diagnose PMDD because
I heard that.
it's there's nothing wrong with my hormone levels. It's how my body's responding to them.
It's a chemical reaction, isn't it?
Exactly. So, and this is again where the fact that doctors don't really understand what they're dealing with or what they're looking for.
A lot of it's
they
obviously
just think,
mental as well, isn't it? Because the hormones are triggering
Exactly.
neurodiverse kind of side.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And there is quite a lot there's more studies that are coming out that actually is saying that there's almost like I can't think of the right word, but if you're neurodiverse, you are more likely to develop PMDD because it's about the way that the brain chemicals are sort of working.
80% of the population. It literally is, because more people are aware of these things now, aren't they?
For sure.
Absolutely. And I genuinely believe that the stats around like 1 in 20 women and AFAB individuals have PMDD is massively underestimated.
And I think when we were talking about awareness as well, it's probably, good to note that, our doctors and nurses are fantastic. And, if they're not given the tools to educate themselves and to be trained on PMDD, then of course they're not going to be able to diagnose it. So it's almost like it's a problem in that area as well. And they're expected to know every single symptom, every single thing that's wrong with someone. And it is disheartening, of course, to get that appointment and leave not having that support. But if they're not aware of this as a condition, then it's not going to even enter their mind that it could be something. So that doctor that you did see and that you did get that validation from, hopefully they've spread the word amongst their surgery. And and it's like any job, isn't it? If you find some information or a nugget that you can share, then you do, because like you said, it's so misdiagnosed and misunderstood, and it hopefully your local doctor's surgery has now got more awareness because of your condition and because of the doctor that diagnosed you. Just thinking about your husband and thinking about your relationship in this time, what was it like in the lead up to getting that diagnosis and that turning point? Did your relationship need to recover? Was it sort of on its last legs because of it? Like, tell us how that evolved and developed. And I assume you're still together now. You were slagging his technology off before we logged on, so clearly the relationship's still going strong with the bickering.
It was challenging. I was a different person to the person that he'd married and the person that he was used to. And we had 2 young children and we're going through kind of COVID times. All of these things are stressful enough. I think it's also really incredibly difficult for men to grasp the concept of just how significant a role hormones play in how we experience life, how they affect the way that we think, the way that we react, our emotions, the way that we feel physically and mentally. And that was, I think it would be hard for any partner to sort of really understand that. And I think we have a tendency as a society to kind of just want people to be well and just to kind of, put your big girl pants on and just suck it up and get on with it. And it just doesn't work that way, does it? So I think it was a relief for both of us when I had an explanation for what was happening and why I was the way that I was. And my natural way of being is to sort of solve the problem and to kind of fix it and get to the root cause and to do the work to make it better. So once I knew what I was dealing with and once I had the kind of right support from the doctors, it was a case of, right, how do I stop this being as big of an issue as it has been, recognizing the fact that this is now going to be something that I live with for the rest of my cycling years. How do I find Jenny again? How do I forge a new identity of the person that's living with PMDD but hasn't completely lost herself to PMDD? And I think that was good for him as well to see that I had a kind of sense of purpose and that I had the kind of drive to do something proactive with it. And then he was able to support me through that once I kind of worked out what my options were and where I sort of went next.
No, I think that's brilliant, like you say, because you're trying to solve it, you're trying to make everybody understand, but I think, like you say, the education is just so important. It's not only for women out there who are listening and experience PMDD, but for those who are around us. It doesn't matter. Like, I know your son and daughter are a lot younger, but obviously when they grow up and they're teenagers, and even in, like, I know in my workplace, for example, like we have menopause courses, but they're open to everybody. They're open to men so they can understand their wives, their daughters, their families, and again, open to the younger generation so they can understand what the older generation, their family are going through. So people can communicate better. So what do you think in education and workplaces, in the communities that you are, how can we create a better understanding and support on this? Like, what do you guys specifically do?
So this is something that I've been like super passionate about since getting my diagnosis, it's something that I've driven within my workplace and got really proactively involved with reproductive health employee resource groups to sort of run events, do awareness sessions, provide support to colleagues with not only PMDD but also endo, adenomyosis, fibroids, PCOS, because there's a lot of intersectionality between a lot of those things. But also I've done quite a bit in the sort of online space and with some other organisations externally, peer support events, panel events. And I think for me, the main thing is around awareness, is around just having an awareness and an understanding that these things exist, that these conditions exist and what they are, and destigmatizing the conversations around menstrual health, around periods, so that it isn't something that people are like, oh, we don't talk about. We don't talk about that.
Yeah.
Because it is having such a negative impact on so many people's lives. And there is a great shift and change that we've seen in talk about mental health as a kind of whole. And we need that to spread through to women's reproductive health, because like half the population, are impacted by their menstrual cycle in an absolute host of different ways. And we need to like stop being so weirded out by it or think of it as something that we shouldn't discuss. Like,
yeah, I think in general, I remember being in school, and if you were in a tiny bit of a mood, the boys in your class would be like, oh, she's on. And then that would just make you feel it's so wrong but humiliated that you're on your period. And I started my period at like, I think I was 11 or 12 years old. I was really, really young.
9.
Oh, I thought I was young. Wow, 9's even younger. But I remember it like it was yesterday. And I remember like I grew up in Cornwall and I was about to go to the beach with all my friends, and I remember it happening, and I said to my mum about it, and she took me into the bathroom and she got me sorted, and I remember it like it was yesterday. It's such a big thing for a girl to start their period, and I've got a 3-year-old daughter, and they go to the toilet with you all the time. So she has seen me on my period, and I'm already talking to her about it. She knows that what I use is a tampon. She called it a plug at one point when she was a bit younger, because I was trying to explain what I was doing. But literally just the other day, she was like, Mummy, have you got your tampon? And I just thought, like, that's brilliant. Like, if I'm having this conversation with her and at 3 years old, she knows what that thing is called. Like, so I am absolutely so of support in trying to break that stigma, like you said, because it's actually ridiculous that we're made to feel like it's a taboo subject, and this happens to us every single month. And I'm always like thinking, if a man had something pouring out of them every month and it affected them mentally and physically, because let's talk about cramps and all that kind of stuff, they would not be able to cope. And then they're the ones that, in year 7 and year 8 at school, taking the mick out of you. It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, you can have all different sides there as well, can't you? Because I had it, because obviously I started so young. Like, I didn't really know what a period was. I was just very lucky a couple of weeks before that I went to a party that was in a nightclub, a 10th birthday party I had. And it had, like, obviously all the tampons and pads. And I was getting, not bullied, but taking the mick out of, because I didn't know what a period was. I thought I was like, because I've been doing this thing on the internet, it wasn't even the internet back then, but on a CD. And it was like, a period's a full stop. And the girls were like, oh my God. Do you know what I mean? Like, so she don't know what a period is. And then again, having that conversation with mum and dad, I can remember my dad shutting down, like, whatever. But then what I'm also interested in now, I think, and the generation that we all are, like, obviously I'm single, like, I don't have a partner, and even still bringing up periods to people that you're dating and that I still find really uncomfortable at the age of 37. How would you say your partners are, like Hannah and obviously Jenny, like, to it? Do you know what I mean? Is it just normal now? Do you know what I mean? This is like coming from the same generation, but it's still so taboo in like a single life. Do you know what I mean? Like, to bring it up, like, if you were dating, you're like, oh, like, in the start of it, you're like, can't really. Do you know what I mean? Because I'm on my period, it's like, oh my God, I feel about, like, well, not 12, because that's too young.
I have. I'm so desensitized to it now because of pretty much because of a lot of the work that I've done through my kind of advocacy stuff, you know, going to like a senior management meeting and talking to like a table of 15 middle-aged men about periods, and you know, when we say that somebody might experience a heavy flow, what does that really mean? Have you ever really considered that? And like watching their faces all go white. So I have no shame whatsoever, but that's only because I've talked about, I've done the hard work and I've sat in the discomfort of it, so that I no longer feel the discomfort and actually take a bit of perverse pleasure in kind of...
Yeah, I can imagine film it next time.
Pushing it.
It just reminds me of Mean Girls, you know, when she's like,
I would say I'm actually like fairly lucky, because I've never really ever experienced any adverse reaction to my period. I really haven't, and I feel very lucky, because I know a lot of friends who do. I know people that are hauled up in bed because their cramps are so bad. And I remember when I was pregnant and they would talk about, when you get your contractions, it's going to feel like really bad period pains, and I was like, I don't get period pains, so like, what am I meant to feel? So I feel very lucky that I've not had to experience that. However, there obviously are still, every month, there's still things that happen. It's still, you know, not great. Even if I don't experience anything too bad, it's still, still uncomfortable, isn't it? You know? So I think Rob, for example, because I've never had any emotional or hormonal reaction to it, I've never been a different version of myself. So now if I got PMDD, because I assume it can happen at any time, like it did with you, Jenny. You know, you'd had your child, you had another one, all of a sudden it affected you. If that did start to happen to me, then it would be a real struggle for Rob and I, because he's never had to experience me once a month, you know, understanding this is a time where she's going to struggle. Like, that's never happened. So I feel very grateful that my body has allowed me just to have my cycles without the sort of effects that a lot of women do have. And I just think hats off to them for having to deal with that once a month, every month, you know?
So in terms of what you say there about the developing of PMDD, it's typically triggered by a hormonal event. So that will either be the onset of the periods. Some people can have PMDD from as soon as their periods start and they start having a cycle, and that is their entire experience. It can be triggered by a miscarriage or pregnancy, or perimenopause. So what a lot of people are finding as they move into perimenopause, because of that, the fluctuations in the hormones and how it's changing, it's like the norm that your body is used to. All of a sudden your hormones are like here, there and everywhere, and that can then trigger. Now, what's tricky is there is quite a bit of overlap anyway with PMDD symptoms and perimenopause symptoms. So a lot of individuals may develop PMDD in perimenopause, but they just write it off as it's perimenopause. And then a lot of people with PMDD find that going into perimenopause makes the symptoms, you know, much worse, until the sweet relief of menopause when they're no longer cycling, and then, you know, the symptoms will be gone.
That's really interesting, because I'm like terrified of starting the menopause, because I just feel like for a woman that is completely it then. You know, I'm not going to be having a second child, but that option is like tiny, you know, in there, because my body will still allow me to do it. But the minute that your menopause starts, like, I'm terrified of how that's going to make me feel. So then if you develop something like PMDD on top of it, like you said, and it's all sort of like confusing, is it menopause, is it not? But then, like you said, interestingly, if it's really affecting someone, they can't wait for that switch to be turned off, for example, you know?
I mean, there are very few treatment options for PMDD. Basically, stopping the cycle is the main one. So that is a contraceptive pill, which works for some people, doesn't work for others, because again, you're putting hormones into a body that doesn't like hormones. For some people, it's not going to work. The Mirena coil, again, because it switches off the cycle, for some people that works, for some people it doesn't, because for some people it doesn't fully switch off. So your body is still producing some of the hormones that it's reacting adversely to. And then the kind of final two steps are either chemical menopause, which is there's an injection that can be administered, which basically shuts off the ovaries and stops you cycling. But with that, you then go overnight into menopause. So you then have to have and doctors can be very apprehensive about administering chemical menopause, especially for younger women who are still of childbearing age. It's quite a serious thing, and they don't like to sort of bring on menopause. It's also only a temporary thing. I think you can only have it for so long. Or the ultimate treatment is an oophorectomy, which is the removal of the ovaries. And some people have oophorectomy and a hysterectomy, which is removing the uterus as well. But again, that catapults you overnight into menopause and all of the associated symptoms that come with that.
So I have a question, just personally about myself, but I presume it might relate to a lot of the listeners. I've been on contraception most of my life, and I haven't had a proper cycle in God knows how many years. So technically, could I have kind of PMDD and not even know about it until I get a cycle, or because these are stopping my hormones working? Is that still something that could come along?
Technically, ultimately, you don't know what your body's natural rhythm is, or your body's natural response to its own hormones in terms of things like endometriosis as well. I think because your body's not naturally going through that process of a natural kind of build up and menstrual cycle, then I guess ultimately that could be the case.
It's so bad for you, isn't it? But it's just like, which ones do you go down, isn't it?
Everybody's got to do what works for them.
And I was just going to touch upon fertility actually. So it's you were obviously saying the different treatment options, and all of it is about stopping a cycle. You've just said, Luce, that you've been on contraception for years, and if and when you choose to go down the route of trying to get pregnant, then trying to treat PMDD by removing the treatment that's helping you to get pregnant is then also a bit of a mind fuck, because you're like, if you are someone that's got PMDD and the only way to stop the symptoms is to stop the cycle, but then you want to have a child, you have to remove yourself off that treatment. Is it linked with sort of poor fertility, PMDD, because of that? Or is there any links at all? It is completely separate?
No, because it's all about, your body's doing what it's supposed to be doing in terms of it's producing an egg, you're ovulating, it's going through that normal cycle. The biggest challenges from PMDD that I have seen from people that I've spoken to who live with PMDD is, there's kind of two sides of the coin. Some people love pregnancy because they're not cycling when they're pregnant. So a lot of people with PMDD absolutely love being pregnant because it's a relief. It's a relief from their symptoms, and they have 9 blissful months of feeling like themselves and feeling wonderful and great. The flip side is that a lot of people with PMDD are really frightened of becoming parents with PMDD because living with PMDD and the ups and the downs and how difficult it is navigating life in that sort of hell week when your symptoms are the worst, to then put yourself in a situation where you have to care for a baby or care for a young child is very off-putting to a lot of people. So it does make people question about whether they actually want to go through that process, because, PMDD is hard. Being a parent is hard. Being a parent with PMDD is really hard.
I mean, I can only imagine. And I think as well, there is a myth about your period taking months to come back, because that's not always the case to some people. You mentioned you were sort of 7-8 months. I was around that same bracket. Some people get it back within 5 or 6 weeks. I know someone who got it back within about 6 or 7 weeks. So if you've got PMDD and that is a fear of yours, it's not truthful just to say, well, you'll get another 6 months after the baby's born, because that might not be the case. But how horrible that is putting people off wanting to have a child.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, the symptoms of PMDD, look, everybody's experience of PMDD is completely individual. There is a big long list of symptoms, and how much they affect one person has no bearing on how they affect the next person with PMDD. It's so personal, which makes it so difficult to treat and to navigate, because what works for one person won't for the other. I think what's just really, really difficult is some of the symptoms are the idea of putting yourself in a situation where you have to care for somebody else and kind of be in a situation where you're mentally capable of that, you know, is quite off-putting and is quite scary. As somebody who has had to navigate parenting, well, I've navigated it the first time round without PMDD and then the second time round with PMDD, you know, it's certainly tougher, but part of the process for me has been really learning and navigating my own experience with PMDD and finding what works for me, what helps me. Having support is incredibly helpful. Asking for support and not feeling guilty about asking for support is really incredibly important, and kind of just really trying to be kind to myself. And one of the hardest things is accepting your own limitations of what I have to give. There's a phrase, I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. It's like you can only give like what you've got today or something like that. And it's basically like if your cup is only half full and you can only give a certain amount, like don't beat yourself up over that. And you have to prioritize it's the same with a lot of chronic conditions as well. You have to be really thoughtful and really mindful about what your priorities are today. And it is possible. It's not easy, it's tough, but you know, I find it a really difficult situation because if I wished away my PMDD, I'd almost be wishing away my second pregnancy. You know, my daughter, my PMDD gave me my daughter, and I wouldn't change that for the world. So it's rubbish, but it's worth it for her. And that's my kind of trying to always find the like
a positive
light, positive. And actually, you know, there's certain things that going through PMDD has given me in terms of self-insight, knowing myself better, really kind of being able to tune into myself, advocating for myself.
And for
so
others.
like helping others 100%.
Like this episode right now, you know, had you not gone through PMDD, you wouldn't have gone to that networking event. You wouldn't be sat here now talking to us about it. And that in itself is going to be such a help for maybe one person who might know someone or could be going through some symptoms that don't feel quite right. This could be helping that person on that journey. So your daughter is absolutely the main, you know, positive out of it. But all the sort of other ones that come off this arm of PMDD is amazing. So that must be really nice to reflect upon if you're having a bit of a down day.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And we all have them. We've all got our kind of struggles that we go through. So this is just been mine.
God, and like we spoke briefly about some of the symptoms of PMDD, and obviously some of them are very, very deep. Like you said, people don't want to bring a child in, and I mean, I'm quite right. We spoke about at the start of the episode, but obviously suicidal thoughts are one strong thing about that. And I can imagine if you're trying to bring a child in, how you're going to react if you're thinking like that. I mean, have you experienced anybody who's been like that through the community, like you've had to help, or like, you know, how bad does it get, if that's the question?
So it can get bad. There is, I can't remember the statistic off the top of my head, but ultimately the rates of attempted suicide and suicide within PMDD sufferers is significantly higher than it is for those who don't have PMDD. Wow. It is, I mean, it is a known symptom, and I think it also just ties into that absolute hopelessness and the despair that comes with that feeling. It isn't a guaranteed symptom that everybody with PMDD will experience that, because I do think some people with PMDD who haven't had that symptom will kind of say, oh, well, I've never had suicidal ideation. Like, I can't have PMDD. It's not like a prerequisite. As with anybody who's experienced some degree of a depressive episode or depression, it's that absolute loss of hope or sort of feeling of any sort of worth in yourself. And I think, you know, personally for me, you know, when I was in the worst parts of my PMDD before I got the treatment and started to be able to manage, it's certainly something that I had experienced on occasion. And it came down more than anything just to that feeling of being a burden on your family, and that feeling of like, they don't deserve this. They don't deserve having to deal with this person that I am because of this. And because of where you are at when you are in the depths of that despair, you just can't see that that's an irrational thought. You can't see that it's not your brain that's telling you that. That's not actually how you feel. That is the PMDD
It shows you how
speaking
powerful hormones are,
in.
though, isn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah,
Like,
Absolutely.
I know people go through
Absolutely.
menopause and they go through depression, like you say,
yeah.
anxiety. It's all those little small things that build up, and this is what it causes you. Like you just said, you feel like you're just not worthy anymore. And you speak to anyone who has unfortunately been in that situation with suicide, they don't want to hurt the people they're around, and that's unfortunately why they
That's
do
their
it. And they
end
don't
game, isn't it?
realize,
Yeah,
They,
yeah,
they just don't want to. They just don't want to feel the way that they feel anymore. They
yeah,
just want it to stop, and that is the severity of being in that kind of space. And it's certainly something that can happen with PMDD. So
yeah.
the awareness, and then there is this sort of phrase that goes around when it's like PMDD Awareness Month, which is usually April, I believe. PMDD awareness is suicide prevention, because the more people know about PMDD, the more people can recognize and understand that the way that they're thinking or feeling is not actually the way that they're thinking and feeling. It's because of this thing that's happening in their body. They can get help. They can recognize that.
And I
The
think
sort of awareness piece is huge.
yeah, and I think that's it's perfect, because talking of awareness, there are now many more sort of more high profile names that are also being advocates for PMDD, like Vicky Patterson, for example. How does it make you feel when you've got someone like that has got what you've got and is able to sort of stand up and advocate for you and many other women out there that's got it? How does that make you feel when you've got that voice talking for you?
So validating. It is so incredibly validating when you see somebody talking about their experience and using phrases or explaining their experience in the same way that you explain your experience. It just makes you feel like, oh my God, this isn't all in my head. Because even when you know what it is, you still always have that, like, why am I like this? Like, what is going on? And then there's also a little element of, I've always been quite open about my PMDD, talking to people about it. I don't doubt. And you get sometimes people that come back with, like, we all get PMS, like, we all feel a bit shit the week before our period. And there's just something about having somebody, and let's face it, it shouldn't be this way, but in today's society, like, people who have a platform or people who are celebrities have more credibility and people believe them more, and there's more weight to what they say. So when somebody is saying exactly all of the things that you've been saying for the last couple of years, it's like, see, it is real. Like, this is how we feel. It is not just me.
And I think it's great that people like that are putting themselves out there, because years ago you wouldn't get someone like that speaking about that in an interview in a magazine. It would damage their reputation. People would be like, oh, I don't like that celebrity anymore. But what's so great about this sort of new age mental health discussions and everything that's out there, and we're being honest and open and vulnerable, just like what we're doing with this space here, is that people are not afraid to stand up and say, this is what I've got. And I know that it will resonate with a lot of people. And yeah, it's frustrating when you said you've got probably friends and family members who are not really believing you, yet Vicky stands up and says it, and they do. But who cares? As long as the message is getting out there, as long as awareness is being raised, that's the main thing. And it's brilliant that people are speaking out and supporting and sharing their stories. And the community is like that as well, I take it, the one that you're part of and the one that you help.
Absolutely, yeah. And what's really nice when you see people sharing their PMDD experiences, and what I particularly like about Vicky's, I guess, transparency and honesty about it, is when she shows that duality of how PMDD affects her. Like, you see the polished version of somebody that they post on social media or that people know and love, and that's, I have that version of myself as well. And that's the version that everybody thinks of when they think of Jenny, or when they that's the me that they expect me to show up as every single day. And yet when PMDD kicks in, it's a completely different version. It's a version of somebody that can barely bring themselves to brush their hair or put their makeup on, and doesn't want to get out of bed, and is crying for no real reason, is so completely overwhelmed by everything. And that version of me is scary and unpalatable. Nobody wants to see that version, but it's still me. It still exists. It's still there. I'm still valid. I'm still deserve to take up space. And what's really lovely with the likes of Vicky Patterson is that she is showing that version of herself. So she's posting the tough moments when she's struggling with PMDD, the moments that most people wouldn't want to post on social media. And that makes it so much easier as somebody who also has those moments to not feel so ashamed of them and to not feel like I have to totally hide that version of me away and only be the presentable version that everybody wants to see.
Yeah. And we spoke a lot about what different treatments are going on. I mean, do you mind sharing with us what treatment, like what do you take to help you?
Yeah. So what's worked for me is one of the first line of kind of medical treatment is SSRI, so selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors.
Wow, what a mouthful.
So, is that like
I know.
fluoxetine or something like that?
Fluoxetine, yes.
it.
So there's a couple of different brands. Fluoxetine is the one that I've never had to. Some people have to kind of mix around things they don't agree with them. But I've been on the same one for the last 5 years now, and that was really hard at first. There's a lot of stigma, isn't there, about antidepressants, and so it felt like a really big thing for me to sort of go down that route, but it was honestly the best thing that I could have done. And it took a while to get the dosage right, but as with a lot of people who take this medication specifically for PMDD, is I alternate my dosage. So I take a single tablet in the first half of my cycle, in the follicular period, where is my kind of better window. And then in the second half of my cycle, where the PMDD symptoms are more prevalent, I have a double dosage, and I just manage that myself. So around about ovulation, I increase my dosage, and that tends to work well for me. And what I found it has helped me, and the way that I described it when I first started taking it, I first started to feel the benefits, was that I'd still feel the effects of PMDD. I'd still feel the symptoms. I'd still feel the emotions, or I'd still feel the response. But I had like a little bit of a gap between feeling or thinking and then reacting. So when I mentioned at the start how I was like incredibly reactive, how I would like burst into tears, or I would lose my rag or shout or whatever, the medication just allowed me that tiny little bit of like brain space where my Jenny rational brain could actually kind of say, hold on, is this really how you're feeling, or is this the PMDD? And actually, how do you want to play this? Do you want to shout and scream and lose your rag? Do you want to burst into tears? Or actually, do you just want to take a second and just kind of think really carefully about what feels like the best approach to take? And that's been transformational for me, because it's given me a sense of control back where I didn't have it before, because PMDD was the one that was completely in control.
No, that's amazing. And talking of transformation, you are advocating, you're helping educate people, you're trying to get into the community, you're coming on spaces like this, you're going to networking events. So obviously all of this has redefined you as a person as well. And like you've mentioned before, actually having PMDD has allowed you to see bits of yourself that you never knew you had. So in light of that, and for every guest we have on our show, for every episode we do, we have our special question. So after your journey, after explaining everything and where we are right now, who is Jenny becoming now?
So I'd say it's a really tricky one, actually. It's like a really personal one, isn't it? I would say that I am becoming somebody who refuses to kind of accept that women just have to have a negative life experience or live with reproductive health conditions like PMDD, and that we should be ashamed of them, or that we should be silenced. It's made me want to support others going through this, to share my experience. It's shown me that connection and community and like shared experience is so powerful in validating us as individuals when we see like our experience reflected back in someone else's experience. So I guess I've kind of taken that, and I'm now becoming somebody who's like wanting to create more space for that, who's wanting to sort of use my experience where I've been validated by a community of PMDD supporters, and I'm kind of using that with my kind of next steps and my business that I'm building to create that kind of community which recognizes that women, we get strength from each other, we get strength from our shared experiences, but also that we need to have better access to information, to education, and have awareness around all of the different topics that affect us, because there's such commonality. Even when we're different, there's always commonality that we can find in our experiences. It's always the case, isn't it, with women? Like, throw a group of women together that have like never met each other before, and like literally within a few moments we're like sharing our deepest, darkest secrets.
Again, that's how we met, wasn't it?
I think that's it's brilliant though, and that's why, even though we've got all these crazy things that affect us as a woman, I love being a woman. Like, honestly, like, I know we've got menopause to come and we've got periods and we've got all the things we've talked about, you know, we give birth and we have to deal with all of this, but I still would be a woman in any life I'm given. So yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah. And tell us more, Jenny, because obviously I know what you're creating right now. Just touch on the new business and what you're doing for women.
So my business is called Elevelle. So Elevelle is my like dragon's den, like elevator pitch. So it is a digital first platform and community. It is built to support women recognizing that our lives are multifaceted. We are expected to be the jack of all trades, the master of all of those trades, but we aren't really given the support, the guidance, the resources to actually allow us to really thrive. We have to deal with all of the reproductive health stuff that we've talked about here, periods, perimenopause. We are expected to show up and have careers and navigate relationship challenges and find our own identity through all of these different things. And we're expected to do it kind of with a smile on our face and with no complaints. And yet all of the resources out there, we live in a man's world, not to sound like I'm on my feminist soapbox, but the information, the resources that are tailored to really recognize the woman's experience. So Elevelle is essentially built to solve that problem. So I'm bringing together experts in all of the different fields and areas that are relevant to women, women's health experts, career coaches, you know, counselors, people who are able to give us real tangible tools. So think of it as like a learning hub as well as a community where you can log in and you can basically pick to say, these are the big challenges that I'm dealing with in my life right now, and I want some content to sort of help me navigate that. So yeah, I'm building basically a space that I wish I've had.
Oh, you had.
Well, I can't wait for that to come into fruition. It's definitely something we'll be happy to check out, and I'm sure listeners will be as well. So keep us posted on when all that's going to be up and running.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Hopefully do. Well, we'll push it as well, won't we? And anything to help out anybody on the other side as well. But like I say, for our listeners, hopefully you might have recognised yourself in Jenny's story. If not, you might know somebody with obviously similar symptoms or can definitely relate. And like I say, no one's broken in this. No one's imagining it. Everyone's pain is valid. And obviously you deserve the support that's out there, which hopefully we can get with Elevite as well.
Yeah.
I said that right. Worked out this episode. I cannot pronounce anything.
And on that note as well, if you can take one thing from today and you do feel like you need to go and get some medical support, then go and see your GP. Even, you know, the first experience that you had, Jenny, you persevered, you came back and you got the help you needed. So yeah, if there's anything, you know, not even just hormonal, anything at all, I'm a big believer in going to the doctors.
It's putting your foot down as well, because we all have experience where we've been fobbed off by one person. If you're not right in 48 hours, ask ChatGPT and go back again. That seems to be my thing anyway.
Definitely.
But no, thank you so much, Jenny. I hope you managed to get as much of your story out as you wanted to today, and hopefully it can help a lot of others. But on that note, that's, a bye from me.
And a bye from me, and thank you so much, Jenny, for educating us.
Yeah, and bye from Jenny. Brilliant.
Oh, God.
Oh, and I obviously forgot, if you liked the episode and you took something from it, again, make sure to can't get my words out, subscribe, and it'll just let you know when the next one's rolling in. And thanks for all your support.
And go back and listen to our previous episodes. There'll be something that you like. But no, thank you, and bye.
Bye.
Bye.